From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Wildcast podcast. I'm Justin Spears, going to be talking some basketball with PJ Brown and Bruce Pascoe. Before we get into it, just want to remind everyone that, hey, it's springtime, and we have a lot of coverage coming your way, whether it's basketball, whether it's golf tournaments. We got rodeo coming up. What else is going on in the springtime, PJ?
We've got great tennis. Men's and women's tennis.
Baseball,
team at UVA.
softball's coming
Baseball
up, too.
and softball. It's going to be a really fun spring. There's a lot of stuff setting up to be one of those that you remember. Yeah, it's going to be a good spring. So to stay up to date with what's going on in Southern Arizona sports, make sure you download the Wildcaster app for free off the App Store and Google Play. We send push alerts. We do a great job of just always updating the app, and we take a lot of pride in that. So you don't need a subscription to the Arizona Daily Star. Everything you want sports-wise is all on the Wildcaster app. However, some stories are subscriber only. So in order to get all of it, you do have to subscribe on Tucson.com. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. PJ, I think we should start before we get into basketball. Start off with the terrible news that happened in the Arizona athletics community. Swimmer Ty Wells passed away at the age of 23 years old. He died this past Friday. Arizona Athletics announced on Monday his passing, and he specialized in the breaststroke. Was a standout for the Arizona Wildcats and played a handful of seasons for the Wildcats. Was it like 4 or 5? Yeah, he was on the squad for 4 seasons. And last spring he hit personal best during the Pac-12 championships. Exactly how you want to go out as a senior doing your best. And so on one hand, that's great. On the other hand, it's just such a really sad moment for everyone in the U of A community. He was known as everybody knew him as a great teammate. He always put a smile on people's faces, and you can see the tributes from across the sports, not just the programs themselves at U of A, but individual student athletes talking about how Ty touched them, whether it was Allie Skaggs from softball or it's just the outpouring of different student athletes. I even saw that Sam Thomas put something out, and everybody is really touched by this. It's so sad.
It is very sad. And we don't know the cause of death. We just know that he passed away this past week. So our thoughts are with the Arizona swimming program and, of course, the family of Ty Wells. May you rest in peace. Okay, PJ, let's move on to basketball. Arizona women's basketball splitting their homestand against the Washington schools, beating UW, and then losing to Washington State. What happened on Sunday?
Yeah, this is it's really interesting. It's a game that, well, first of all, we always have to say that the Pac-12 is such a tough conference that things happen on any given day. If you even look at Friday night, UCLA lost to Colorado. It just was, even Stanford came down to the wire and finally pulled out a win on Friday night. It's been a really tough season. Having said that, this is a game that Arizona could have won, and not just on paper, but even during the game, there were moments they had runs like they usually do. They had big rallies, and they just couldn't sustain it. They had letdowns. And if you really start looking at this program and their losses, putting Stanford aside because they're Stanford, but if you look at the Pac-12 losses, it all comes down to defense. This is the thing that Adia Barnes has been harping since day one, that this team just doesn't play good defense, or the defense that she thinks they could play or wants them to play. And it shows up in games like these. I mean, you look back at the Colorado game. They lost because someone missed an assignment and didn't cover Frida Foreman, who was hot. She hits a three. That's kind of a dagger. That sort of ends that rally. If you look back at this game against Washington State on Sunday, they were giving up like really easy buckets in transition. This is not what an Arizona defense does. There were a lot of those, and then just not disciplined, smart play by the defense. And while a lot of people say, well, they couldn't score and they missed a lot of easy shots, and they did at the end, and yes, they did, but offense really isn't the problem.
Yeah.
It's the defense. The defense has been losing these games, and also even though they missed some shots in all of these losses, they still had a chance to win, which means other things are working, and they have the potential to be a much better team and to win more games. It's a matter of them coming together as a team, I think, and really figuring out what's going on with them mentally. What the players individually, I think, need to do this. And this is a time to do it. It's February. This is crunch time. This is when everybody gets tired. There's a month left in the season before you hit postseason. And this is the time when everybody has to suck it up to sort of push through. And this is the time where the Wildcats individually as a team, the players have to come together and say, we need to put it together. We could have won those games. We can win those games going forward. Here's what we need to do. They need to figure this out.
Yeah. Well, they certainly need to figure it out, because now they go to Los Angeles. And then right after going to Los Angeles, they got to come home and play against Stanford on Thursday. Weird Thursday game, but it's on ESPN, so they get, some nationally televised love there, and it's going to be a tough stretch for Arizona. I mean, these next few games, I feel really good about them against Cal on Sunday, but I mean, shoot.
Cal's been really tough this year, so who knows?
Well, and also, didn't they have a terrible season a couple years ago, and didn't they upset Arizona at McKale Center? So
it's a funny matchup for Arizona, that Cal matchup. Yeah. And tough also, stretch. Typically you think, well, SC is tough, but who knows? SC beat Stanford a couple weeks ago, and this weekend they beat Colorado on Sunday. So that's going to be a tough game too. Yeah. So you can't overlook any of these teams coming up. It's a tough stretch. The other thing that needs to be said as well, we're talking about this tough loss that they had Sunday, that they could have won this game. Remember, they've won 16 games. If they win 4 more, Adia Barnes will have won 20 in the last 5 years. She'll be the only U of A coach who's done that. Won 5, 20, back to back, whatever, 20 win seasons. That's an incredible accomplishment. You win 20 games, you're going to the NCAA tournament. That's not what it is. It's that as a program, you want to continually to get better, and you want to peak towards the end of February to go into that NCAA tournament really strong. So this is the time for them to come together, make the few changes. These are like little things. If they don't have these letdowns, if they could play, a 35-minute really good game, right? Maybe even if they start out slow, they've shown that they can rally but then they let down at the end, right? Yeah. If they can sustain that, then maybe this is a team that sort of starts slow, gets their momentum, and then pushes on the pedal and finishes. But they have to finish. Even Friday night, in the last minute and a half, they let Washington score 9 points. Well, the game wasn't over. They have to play till it says 0-0.
Yep.
And so once they sort of mentally lock in, I think that this team could do much better. I keep saying they have the potential, right, to do much better. At this point, I really think it's a mentality, and they have to just shift into that. If you look back at other years, a lot of times U of A has finished poorly. Last year they finished poorly with Kate Reese out for her shoulder injury. Yeah. And even the 2021 year where they went to the national title game, they finished poorly at the end. They lost right away at the Pac-12 tournament. And then the team came together and said, we're better than this. We can do this. And then they went on a run. Same thing the year they went to the WNIT championship. They finished really poorly, and somehow they came together. And you could tell when they didn't get a bid to the NCAA tournament and went to the WNIT instead, their mentality flipped a switch at that moment. And you could tell before the first game that they were going to win that championship. It was so incredible, the confidence that they exuded, and you just knew it was going to happen. You know, if a team can flip the switch and do this mentally, a lot of really good things can happen.
Absolutely. Before we go to a couple mailbag questions, PJ, this week is the 50th anniversary of McKale Center opening its doors. I know you didn't grow up in Tucson. You're originally from Wisconsin.
Yes.
But you've been working in Tucson, Arizona now for a little while, at least enough to experience a lot of games at McKale Center. So, PJ, what are a couple key moments in your time covering the Arizona women's basketball team at McKale Center? I can maybe assume that WNIT is one of them, and then maybe the win over Stanford?
Yeah, the WNIT tournament is the top of my list always. There was something special about that run. Like I said, they exuded this confidence that you knew they were going to win, and it's how the community rallied around them. I mean, this is a team that really hadn't won since Adia Barnes got to Arizona as their coach. Remember, the year before, they only won 6 games. So
one thing that stood out to me about that, PJ, was during that time, even when Adia Barnes was hired, the curtains were down at McKale Center because they couldn't fill the upper deck. And then the WNIT championship happens, Northwestern's in town, and not only were the curtains were raised before that, a couple games before that, but they sold out every single seat. It was I think a Pac-12 record. It certainly was an Arizona program record, but it was a Pac-12 record. And to see a sellout crowd for an Arizona women's basketball game, like I had never seen that before. And it was that, to me, let me know, okay, something's turning here.
And when you even mentioned that, I got chills because I remember what it was like sitting there. And I think I asked you to check on the meter what the noise level was, right? And I mean, it was incredible. And it was like storybook, like every game more and more people came. And it's like they jumped on the bandwagon, right? And they realized what was going on here. And everybody in the community got excited. And it was this really a fantastic thing. I don't think that anything will ever top that for me. And I've covered NCAA tournaments. I was with Arizona in San Antonio, in my own bubble, of course, and they were in a bubble. But and that was exciting for a different reason. But nothing to me tops this WNIT run. The next thing, obviously, was the Stanford win. Again, that was, it was electric. The fans were incredible. They were the sixth man. Yeah. And to watch Ari McDonald, who her game was okay, and then in the fourth quarter, she came alive like she had done so many other times. Gets the basket that puts them into overtime and then gets the game winner. And then to beat Stanford of all teams. That was incredible. And again, it was just also sitting back and watching the fans and that was so exciting. Those are probably the biggest, standout games that I've seen at, covering this team at Arizona in McKale Center. And to me, they go right on the top of the list of best moments ever.
Absolutely. I think WNIT, spoiler alert here, I'm doing a rundown of the top 50 moments in McKale Center history, and WNIT Championship cracked the top 5.
That's great.
Keep your eyes out for that. Also included Adia Barnes when she was a player, 1998 when they beat Stanford.
Yeah, that's a great one.
I think Stanford might have won like 22 in a row.
Yeah,
the Wildcats. They dominated.
They didn't. Well, not only that, but they didn't lose a Pac-10 game back then in like 5 years or something. It was an incredible win.
Yeah, lots of great moments for the women's basketball team at McKale Center. PJ, before we let you go, though, Ray Coolness has a question for you. He says, for Arizona women's basketball, are they looking to add one more for the 2023 class? How is Lauren Ware's progress, and when will she be practicing with the team?
Okay, so we'll tackle the Lauren Ware question first. I haven't gotten an update in the last, I think, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? I said, if Lauren wants to talk to me, that's great. The program hasn't given me an update on her rehab, and I don't believe that she will be practicing with the team until after the season's over. So I think that's sort of the plan. I don't think that she can practice with the team. She's still in rehab. The 2023, if they're adding somebody, is really interesting. I saw probably what everybody else saw on Instagram and Twitter that Mallory Miller, I believe her name is, came to visit. She's been visiting a lot of schools. That she had an unofficial visit at Arizona on Sunday. And she's she's 6'5". She's from South Dakota. But she went to ASU on Friday night. She's been at Louisville. The interesting thing is I've been trying to talk to some, recruiting gurus, and, she wasn't on anybody's list. I don't know if, I noticed that she was also a volleyball player, so maybe she had been thinking about playing volleyball and then decided to play softball. So she looks to be a 2023, and it looks like Arizona's in the running.
Wow, okay. We'll have to pay attention to that. When do you think there's a timeline on her announcement?
Well, I don't know if she would announce early, but they have the signing period in April. That's when Paris Clark signed last year. Yeah. So that might, if she signs with a team, that's obviously when she would sign, is in April. Whether she verbally commits before that or not, we don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, PJ, thank you for stopping by.
Sure.
PJ Brown, Arizona women's basketball insider for the Arizona Daily Star women's basketball team on the road this week. They face UCLA on Friday at 9 p.m. and then Sunday they take on the USC Trojans. Both those games are on Pac-12 networks. And make sure you follow PJ Brown on Twitter and check out Tucson.com for her coverage of the women's basketball team. All right, let's talk with Bruce Pascoe about what's going on with the men's basketball team and McKale Center memories. All right, and now I'm joined by Bruce Pascoe, Arizona men's basketball insider for the Star. Bruce, once again, Arizona sweeps, second straight sweep. They swept the Washington schools this past weekend on the road after beating the LA schools. So the Wildcats are on a little bit of a roll now, and good things have happened for them outside of just their wins. UCLA lost to USC on Thursday. Utah also lost this past weekend. So now the Wildcats are just a half game out of first place in the Pac-12 championship picture, which seemed unreasonable a couple of weeks ago, but now they're right there vying for a championship, which is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, you didn't think UCLA was going to go undefeated. At least I didn't. It's too competitive a conference, and it's hard for these guys to keep playing at a super high level for 20 games. But to have them lose a couple times, it's just the way the schedule worked out, frankly, because they had to go to SC. SC only beat them, or only lost by 2 points at Poly earlier in the season, and so it wasn't a surprise to see USC beat them either. And then Utah, maybe people figuring them out a little bit, and they were surprised early, and they're still way better than expected. But again, people, the second time through, everybody's scouting everybody, and it's a different deal. So now we got a real race here. I mean, my God, there's like half of the league is bunched within a game or two at the top.
It's like the Western Conference standings in the NBA. You can go from third place to 12th just when you lose a couple of games. So it's a tight race. But Bruce, what's stood out to you about how Arizona was able to win on Saturday? Because Washington gave them fits last time down here in Tucson, and we know that Mike Hopkins has that 2-3 zone that he took over from his days at Syracuse, and it's been an issue for the Arizona Wildcats before Tommy Lloyd. I mean, that was like Sean Miller's Achilles heel was a 2-3 zone, and it was a problem for Arizona down in Tucson. But I think Arizona this time around did a really good job of playing inside and out, moving the ball around, getting everyone some touches, and then finding their spots, getting Azuolas Tubelis and Umar Ballo down low in the post. And they were hitting these weird shots. It was like shots that are close to the rim, but they're not considered paint points. Right? They're not layups, they're not dunks, but they're like these lobs that are kind of in that middle area in that 2-3 zone. So I think Arizona did a really good job of really exposing that and executing that.
Right. Sometimes that's what they're going to give you in that, and you take it, and maybe it's only 2 points, but if you get a high enough percentage of them, it doesn't matter. And then of course they had Kirk Risa just killing it from the outside as well, and that was a big difference between that and the game in McKale. But I think that zone is they're committed to it. They're aggressive in it. They play it the whole game, and it's just really hard to replicate, I think, in practice. And the difference is they went through the game, and just a few weeks ago in McKale, and they had seen it. They knew exactly what they had to do. And granted, they got better even in that game. Remember that game? Washington took a 14-point lead when Arizona was really initially kind of stumped by it. And really didn't take off until the last 10 minutes of that game, and then they carried over into this game. And I think also on a small point too, that first Washington game was when Umar Ballo came back basically from the emergency room, and wasn't quite himself in that game, and he's almost 100% now. He's certainly productive at about 100%. So it's just a different look in a number of different ways, and I think the other thing that really impressed me too, or just struck me, was that they kind of went back to some of their offensive ways, because they were doing that, and they were passing the ball more, a little more efficient, and just a lot more prolific. I mean, they had kind of become this grinded out team, the last 3 weeks or so, and then boom, score 95 points at Washington.
Yeah. Is that the best second half they've played all season long? Because they've had some good halves this year. I think about the Maui Invitational and how they were able to play, but to me, Bruce, I think that Azuolas Tubelis, Umar Ballo, both of them having double-doubles, it's only happened 3 times this season.
Yeah.
And you couple that with Kirk Risa's 3-point shooting. Courtney Ramey completely erupted in the second half. I mean, when those 4 guys get going, and then you add in a Cedric Henderson who was kind of flirting with a double-double, had 9 points, 8 rebounds. I think Pelle Larsson could play a little bit better, but I think he's been very solid ever since going back to his 6-man role. But when I look at how Arizona played in that second half, I know that tough teams like Houston and TCU are going to give Arizona some problems, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a team that could beat Arizona if they play like that in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to remember individual halves, but you're right. I think that maybe you go back to Maui and that Cincinnati game or something, although they didn't. I don't think they had the kind of half they did against Washington. It might be that might be about right.
Well, it was also 23-14 in favor of Washington. Washington was leading this game early on.
Yeah.
And at first it was trending into, okay, there's the step back game that Arizona is going to have on a Saturday. It was bound to happen, right? Mm-hmm. But then Arizona just completely hit a switch, and they outscored Washington 81-49 to end the game.
Yeah.
And again, the last few games have been these grinded out, old school style games, but I don't know, Washington, that second half was akin to the Arizona teams that we saw last year.
Yeah, and they defended Washington pretty well, but won it with offense. And I think combined with the defense that they've shown really since about New Year's, that really bodes well for this Arizona team, showing the flexibility, which they didn't really have as much last year, even though they were more talented and efficient offensively, probably. this team can win in different ways, and that's obviously a huge deal. Come NCAA tournament time, when who knows what's going to be thrown at them.
All right, Bruce. Before we talk McKale Center memories, we have a few mailbag questions. The first one comes from @eheels10. They ask, with UCLA and USC moving to the Big Ten, what are you hearing about possible Pac-12 additions? San Diego State, Gonzaga, BYU? Well, we do know that BYU is going to the Big 12. Is it just for football, or is it for every sport? I know that they're scheduled to go to the Big 12 in a few years, so I would say rule out BYU. But San Diego State, I think, would be a good option. And Gonzaga, obviously, as a basketball-only member, would be great for the Pac-12.
Or all sports except football, since they don't have football. And I've always thought that could make sense, because you don't have to be symmetrical in football. You can have 11 teams. It's just fine. In basketball and a lot of other sports, it might make sense to go for 12. And if you can get Gonzaga in there, that would make a lot of sense. And I think, obviously, as we've discussed and John Wilner has discussed, San Diego State makes a lot of sense on pretty much every front. As a replacement, the question is whether they're going to, go to 12. And, I've always personally thought UNLV makes a lot of sense for that 12th spot, but Gonzaga as everything but football could work as well. And, I think we've speculated a lot. I think there's some obvious possibilities out there. There's, a couple other schools out there that could work, but I think ultimately it's probably going to come down to behind the scenes what the TV networks say, because they're going to be the ones that say, well, if you add San Diego State and so we might be interested, or we might not, and then maybe the Pac-12 decides, what, they're not going to give us that much more. Maybe we're going to stay at 10 and divide up the pie by only 10. That could work, because you don't have to have divisions now in football. I mean, it's just I don't think anything's a guarantee, and I think a lot of it's going to come down to those media rights negotiations and a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and a lot of people at Fox and ESPN ultimately making the decision.
Our next question comes from Diesel Fuel. Diesel asks, how does Pac-12 competition compare to WCC or MWC, where Gonzaga is from? Well, first with the Mountain West standings, obviously Gonzaga is not in that, but San Diego State, Boise State, New Mexico are some really good teams. I know New Mexico, they've been in and out of the top 25 this season. They've had some pretty impressive wins.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Nevada's coming on too?
Didn't New Mexico have the Patino matchup? Didn't father and son go up against each other in Albuquerque? I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, Mountain West, they have a few good teams. As far as the West Coast Conference, I mean, Loyola Marymount upset Gonzaga a couple weeks ago. But outside of that, I think Gonzaga is obviously once again head and shoulders better than everyone else.
Yeah, although again, I think it's not so much the programs and the success. I mean, obviously the tradition of the programs has something has something to do with it, but a lot of it just gets down to fit, and television market size, alumni base that's going to be interested and engaged, and and then some. A lot of these decisions are also made by the presidents of the universities. They're the ones that are voting and backing these things, and sometimes some schools are better fits than others, and they get excited about some schools. These are things that fans are just different. I mean, it's the reason why the Big Ten might want to pick off Stanford at some point, because of Stanford's academics.
Yeah,
that has nothing to do with Stanford's success, because they're usually mediocre in the major sports. They're great in other sports, but so it's just there's just a lot of factors there.
I don't want to disrespect St. Mary's, by the way. They've won 10 in a row. Now they're 19-4, still undefeated in a conference play. So I was raving about Gonzaga being head and shoulders above everyone else. St. Mary's might have something to say about that. Yeah. But going on to
the metrics, love St. Mary's. Every week I look at the metrics. I'm at their like fourth, or I'm like, what? I mean, they're good, but I just don't see them being that good.
Yeah.
But,
all right. Our next question comes from at GMFDE83. Gabriel asks, what if Keon Brooks had chose Arizona instead of Washington? Man, well,
I saw that. I think he did well in NIL at UW, and he got a lot of shots and a lot of minutes, and I don't know that he would get quite that many here. He certainly would have brought a kind of hybrid dimension that Arizona could use, and I think that's why they recruited him a lot last spring.
But
it would have been, he would have had to play a little bit different role here because, he wouldn't have been like up at UW. He is the guy. And
he'd be Cedric Henderson here.
He'd be more of an offensive factor than Henderson, but he might be the third option, whereas right now he's basically this year's Terrell Brown up there. He's the guy. So, I think for him personally, he probably made a good decision. But Arizona could have used him and might have been, marginally better to have that assuming the chemistry worked with him, that might have been marginally better to have that weapon in there. But that's recruiting for you. You get some, you lose some.
At UA Kathmandu asks, will the Pac change next year's schedule so UA plays UCLA twice? Would that require payment to whomever doesn't get a UCLA road game? Does the Pac just not want the hassle of changing the schedule?
Well, they've answered that. They're pretty quiet about it, but they did say they're leaving it open. And the thing about the schedule, and it's kind of complicated to explain, but it's basically a 10-year rotation that started last year. Then they're supposed to go through 32 or whatever, or 31. And because UCLA and USC are not going to complete it, it doesn't need, it's not going to be symmetrical anyway. So they basically are leaving the possibility open. They might blow it up. And I think what's going to happen, again, it's going to come down to television. If ESPN says we want Arizona, UCLA, we want UCLA at Arizona, which is not on the schedule right now, I think the Pac-12 will make it happen, and they'll probably upset somebody who's going to lose a home date with UCLA, and they won't get that ticket revenue. But they can easily sell that by saying, we're keeping our media rights partners happy. This is helping in our negotiations. There's a big picture aspect for everybody involved in that. So even to say, I don't know who it is that they might take away from. Say they took it away from Washington State, and Washington State's going to lose, an extra, 3,000 tickets sold or whatever. I think that, I think those, whoever it is could realize, well, this is the big picture of the conference. Let's go ahead and do it. And I think, and call it everybody, Tommy Lloyd said this too. I mean, it's good for college basketball in general to have these kind of things. So I think there's a pretty good chance it happens. It's just, it's something we're not going to know probably till May or June.
They got to do it. I mean, I know that grinder of a game a couple weeks ago at McKale Center was a good one to end on, but I don't know, man.
It was, and it would be another one, and it would be even more emotional because it would be the last time, and the atmosphere for UCLA games is always terrific, and you could have it on a Saturday afternoon and bring in Billis again or Walton or whoever you want, and it would just be, it would be huge, and that's good for, it would be good for ESPN, it would be good for the Pac-12, it would be good for Arizona, and frankly, it would be good for UCLA.
All right, last question, Bruce. This one comes from at Preller Forever. Their question is, what teams are the worst matchups for Arizona in the tournament? Teams with elite bigs, elite guards, or elite wings? I would say probably perimeter players. Because, Arizona's bigs have done a pretty good job against other notable front courts this season. Mm-hmm. I go back to the Indiana game. I think about, some of the other matchups they've had this season. And Azuolas Tubelis and Umar Ballo, when they're healthy and they're available, you'd be hard-pressed to find another front court that's better than them. But we've also seen Arizona's guards really be inconsistent this year. And while they came back to life against Washington, I would like to see more consistency out of Kirk Kriisa and obviously Courtney Ramey and Pelle Larsson in his sixth-man roles. So I think for right now, if Arizona has an Achilles heel or a weakness, I would say it's definitely on the perimeter. But when those guys are on, man, they're on, and they're really good.
And they have gotten a little better in there. And I think part of the problem is just adjusting without Christian Coloco this year, because I think they tweaked it a little bit to helping more off, a little bit more aggressive, because they knew if somebody got by him, Coloco was in the middle. And Umar Ballo is a tremendous player in a lot of ways, but not quite the same kind of, and he's actually blocked a fair amount of shots, but he's not quite the same presence who can just, you drive in there and you're like, oh my God, there's Christian Coloco, it's a difference. So they've had to kind of tweak, and I think that we're seeing they've adjusted to that. I think Courtney Ramey's gotten better individually. He's a really good defender who's sort of changed his style a little bit to mesh with what Tommy Lloyd wants to do. So that's been a plus for them as well. But I think you're right, Justin. Yeah, I think it's perimeter players. And I think, obviously if a team has a stretch big like a Muhammad Gay, that's scary for Arizona because, I don't think they're, this is true to a lot of teams, but I don't think that they can easily handle a big guy going out there shooting over them.
All right. Thank you all for submitting your mailbag questions. We do this every single week, so make sure you follow me on Twitter at JustinESports for your chance to submit questions on a weekly basis. All right, Bruce, before we get out of here, this week marks 50 years since McKale Center opened its doors. It's going to be, I think Wednesday is the anniversary on February 1st. And on February 1st, 1973, Arizona beat Wyoming. Since then, they've had a lot of wins under Fred Snowden, obviously under Hall of Fame and the late, great head coach, Lute Olson, Sean Miller, and now Tommy Lloyd. But, Bruce, you've covered a lot of games at McKale Center. When you think about probably the most iconic games that you've been a part of, what are 3 or 5 that come to mind?
I honestly have to do some thinking about that. I don't know if I could say off the top of my head. I mean, what comes to mind is pretty much any game with in the early years for me, late in the Lute Olson year, you remember Stanford coming in, and there were a number of years where Stanford would win here and Arizona would win at Stanford. It was just a crazy rivalry. And then you always remember UCLA games, and then the last 10, 12 years, Oregon has been unbelievable. I think, honestly, what I remember now is like the one loss they had at Oregon where I think Raleigh Hawkins was visiting and Caleb Tarzewski and Sean Miller got into it, and it was just like the tension was unbelievable in that game. That's what I remember. And then, I think the whiteout game where Derek Williams blocked the shot and the claw on his hand for his broken pinky, which they wouldn't say was a broken pinky, but everybody knew it was a broken pinky. Just, that was probably up there. But man, boy, a lot of great moments.
I think of Salim Stoudemire's game winner against UCLA, where took the ball over half court, maybe took about 5 or 6 dribbles, top of the key, 3-pointer, game over. Hassan Adams stole the following inbounds pass from UCLA, and Arizona, won that game. That was a Saturday afternoon, right, at McKale Center between nationally ranked UCLA, nationally ranked Arizona. The Derek Williams block in that whiteout game was great. The 49 home game winning streak coming to an end. But you know what? There have been some other incredible memories before our time, Bruce. I think about, I actually did this rundown of top moments in McKale Center history, and I mean, you got to put Sean Elliott breaking Lou Alcindor's Pac-10 scoring record. I think about, Arizona's 71 game winning streak coming to an end, and I think 1992. Yeah. So just a lot of great moments.
I have a couple of people who've been here way longer than me. I think there was when they played Duke in the Fiesta Bowl Classic.
Oh, 91.
Yeah, whenever I was before my time, and but that game and that era, 88 to 91 or whatever. I mean, that seemed like that was the era where a lot of fans bought in, and generations, little kids went out then and became teenagers and adults, and sort of have absorbed Arizona basketball because of those years and the successes and the way that those teams bonded with the community. And individual games like that really jumps out. I mean, people still talk about that game and some other games in that era like they were a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
It was 30 plus years.
Think about this, Bruce. That was a Duke team that had Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley, Grant Hill. I think Jay Billis was like a young assistant coach for Coach K on the sidelines. Yeah. And then they beat Shaquille O'Neal, LSU, in those years. They also beat the Fab Five in those years too. And those are, some key moments in college basketball history, and Arizona took them all down in some way at McKale Center. So,
I think, and the one also, there was a not Arizona game, Georgetown UNLV 1991. That was another one that jumps out to kind of crazy. They were undefeated, I think, at that time, and they eventually pulled away. But I remember, there was a lot of talk about that being one of the more pivotal games or whatever that wasn't involving Arizona. Because that's the other thing you forget, because it hasn't happened in a long time, because it sort of went away during the Miller era. But Arizona used to host tournament games, first and second round, for every third or fourth year or whatever it was, and there were some good ones in there.
Absolutely. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast podcast. The Arizona men's basketball team, they're back in action this week against the Oregon schools. They got the Oregon Ducks on Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Nice little late game there at McKale Center. Make sure you follow our coverage on the Wildcats basketball program on Tucson.com and the Wildcaster app. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.